Tarantino doing Star Trek? The hell? That's not real. Oh, wait, it is. Huh. Well, now I have to talk about it. So, if you don't know, I both love and hate Quentin Tarantino. Pulp Fiction is one of my favorite movies, and I have a video on here where I'm just praising it. And then there's been other times on this channel, mostly live streams, where I go on a rant and I complain about Kill Bill or Death Proof or even Django Unchained. And let me get this across. I actually like almost all Quentin Tarantino movies to some degree. The only one that I'm not really big on is the Kill Bill movies, but to each their own. It's just not my bag, you know. That's cool. But Tarantino is an interesting guy because he's someone I do love to hear talk in interviews about movies and even his own films. And I like that he's actually happy with his own work, and can explain why he's happy with it. He's not one of those guys who's always trying to be so humble. You know, he's like, no, I wrote this, I'm proud of it, and let me tell you why I am. I always respect people like that. You should stick up for your work, because it's yours and you know what it means, and only you can properly articulate what it is, really. It's why I like to get audiobooks where the author reads the book. I just like how the author reads his own words. But once again, teach their own. If you listen to an interview earlier this year, and I can't remember where the interview was from, unfortunately, and I'll have to try and find that later for you guys because I found it on just some random clip on YouTube. It wasn't even it wasn't even the interview. It was a part of it. But Tarantino was asked about Star Wars, and he talked about how he didn't really want to direct Star Wars. Not that he wasn't a fan, but it never really was his bag. And I thought that too because you always hear that like Tarantino will never do a Star Wars film. Edgar Wright, you know. Those names in particular I see thrown around on websites. I don't know why they throw Edgar Wright in there right beside Tarantino. It seems a little odd, but anyway, it's always like, yeah, Tarantino will never do Star Wars because you don't get to be unique about it. You don't get to be creative. You don't get to have your vision come across. And it's like, that's true. You know, the individualism of the filmmaker can get lost in a Star Wars movie. But he did say he wanted to do Star Trek. And I remember that, hearing that. He said, no, I would be interested in doing a Star Trek movie. That made a lot of sense, thinking about him growing up watching Star Trek. And it seemed like he was a really big fan of the original series and William Shatner's Kirk and all that, which totally me too. And he seemed to be a TNG fan as well. I've watched all the Star Treks. I'm behind on the new Star Trek show right now, Discovery, because I'm just not enjoying it that much. There's been a couple episodes of STD that were all right. There was one with Rainn Wilson I liked quite a bit that felt pretty close to like a TNG episode. Everything else I've just not been a fan of the writing or the characterization. Visually it looks good. It's a good looking show, but that's not really why you watch Star Trek, is for visuals. J.J. Abrams took the franchise over years ago, and it seemed like it was coming back with a bang when he released his Star Trek movie, which a lot of fans call New Trek, NU. It was a big hit. Domestically, it made $257 million. It had 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. Chris Pine was like overnight movie star. Everyone thought, you know, it really took off. I enjoyed that movie as an action film and an adventure movie, not really as a Star Trek film. But I do think the people who hate it can't really appreciate it as a decent film, as an adventure movie, and then also other people can't understand why Star Trek fans don't like it, hardcore ones, because it really is that kind of movie. It's like a love it or hate it experience. I personally think, though, it's a watchable movie. I saw it in the theater a couple times and always had fun. It doesn't have an ounce of depth, but it's just like watching a fun movie with your friends. Like you know, the cast is likable. I find them likable, and you know, yeah, Abrams' lens flares and his camera work and all that can get a little grating, but if you take it for what it is and not what you want it to be, I think it's a enjoyable experience. And the Star Trek Into Darkness I thought was just a total mess. Once again, visually pretty engaging, very well done. Clearly an audition for Star Wars, but yeah, the Khan reveal halfway through is laughable. It just falls flat. And Tarantino even talked about this in that interview I was discussing, where he said he liked Abrams' film because he liked they were playing the younger versions of the cast from the 60s. And he said that the second film ruined it because Benedict Cumberbatch would still be a young Ricardo Montalban. He would still be Khan. He wouldn't become this British white guy. He would still be Khan. That wouldn't have changed, but they just change it because whatever, they didn't care. They tried to play that mystery box. Even Abrams later admitted that that was a mistake. It was very odd that instead of just writing a new villain that they could have cast with Cumberbatch, they decided to just make him Khan, and instead of advertising that, they tried to hide it and make it a plot twist, which the plot twist legit makes no sense because Kirk and Spock and everyone wouldn't know who Khan is. So when he goes, I am Khan, everyone's like, okay, what does that matter? Um, so Abrams left, went to go do Star Wars, and then Justin Lin came in to do from the Fast and the Furious franchise. He came in to do Star Trek Beyond. Now, Star Trek Beyond, I do prefer to Into Darkness. There's a lot of problems with it. Once again, too much action, a terrible montage music part with sabotage. But Simon Pegg wrote the script, and it does go back to more classic Star Trek. Its characters spending time with each other, bonding. The scenes with Spock and Bones I really like in that movie, and I think it was a step on the right direction, but still not great. So yeah, that movie didn't perform that great at the box office. Star Trek Into Darkness was a financial disappointment, but it still made money. That really wasn't the case with Beyond. Beyond made 300 and I think 58 million on a 185 million dollar budget. That doesn't include marketing, and it only made I think 160 mil domestic. I don't even think it made that much. It had a decent opening weekend, but then it dropped after that. So then we got Star Trek Discovery, which was all just a feels like a scheme now to get us to go watch CBS All Access, which I don't know anyone who got it. Everyone I know who watches the show torrents it and stuff like that. But once again, to each their own. If you want to buy CBS All Access, more power to you. It actually had pretty good ratings. It did like 10 million on the first episode, but then they didn't air anymore, so we don't really know. The critical reception's been mixed. I feel like a lot of critics that gave the first two episodes a pass, and that might just be because of political bias. And I'm not saying that Star Trek wasn't always leaning one way or always kind of SJW. It always was. Gene Roddenberry was an SJW, but the thing is, there's a context for what a show does in the '60s when it's talking about multiculturalism, and it has an Asian man on there and a black woman and all that. Those are powerful things at that time. The things that Star Trek Discovery are trying to make powerful in a 2017 context just fall flat, in my opinion. It's like, well, yeah, this just seems outdated. This doesn't feel modern and hip like you're trying to make it, and it also doesn't feel like classic Star Trek. I know what they're going to say. Star Trek was always about these things in the subtext. Well, that's true, but it was never this, poorly rendered. It never had this lack of clarity. It was never so simplistic and lacking nuance in its views. It really did nothing interesting that wasn't already done in Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine did a lot of the things that Discovery's getting credit for, and did it better. And to me personally, I like the week to week Star Trek structure. Although I'm not against them doing the long form plot line, the binge style, the Netflix style. I get that in today's world, and I think you can do that with Star Trek. Each episode just bleeds into the next one, and you have one long storyline that really is like the ultimate Star Trek episode, and it's played out like a really long movie. I do think you could have done that over 6-8 hours, really. It wouldn't have bothered me. It'd have been like those episodes back in the day that were like two-parters, but it'd be a few parts. So I'm all for that. A new Star Trek show. I was excited for Discovery. In particular, when Brian Fuller was working on it, the guy who did Hannibal and Pushing Daisies, and the team sounded great, but it sounds like it all fell apart behind the scenes. So I'm not really sure who got dropped, why it didn't go through. They fought over scripts and concepts and stuff like that. I don't know all the drama that went on with Discovery. Now they renewed it for a second season, even though I thought they were just gonna, every season was supposed to be a different storyline. But now apparently it's one storyline. And then they said in season 2 they're gonna fix all the issues fans have with season 1, but I'm not gonna hold my breath. Anyway, go back to Tarantino. In that interview, he talked about how he wanted to do a longer version and expansion on the city on the edge of forever, on the edge of forever, which is a very classic Star Trek story. When he talked about that, that really got me excited because I was like, man, you know what? Tarantino has always had this thing where it feels like he could make a more family-friendly movie, a commercial film that would transcend just his fan base. And I don't mean that in any, precious way or something like that. I like that Tarantino makes R-rated movies. I like that he makes his own movies the way he wants to and all that the crime genre's done. But I've always seen potential for him to make something almost like Frank Capra, which is, I think, what you would have to do with this if you want to adapt that story. I've always felt like he has the side to him that does have a heart and magic, that's very optimistic about life and the future. And I think, in a lot of ways, he might be one of the better directors to do Star Trek. Not just because he's a good director technically, and he's smart and all that, and he's good at dialogue. And we need a Star Trek film with some good dialogue, please. Please. But it's just the fact that he seems to really care about stories in a very specific way to him, the kind of actors he likes, and the kind of stories he's into, and the kind of worlds he likes to build. That talent that he has for world building and characterization that you see in all of his movies, even in Pulp Fiction, how he designs that L.A. and those people. I think it could work in Star Trek. I think he's an ensemble director. All of his films are pretty much ensembles when you look at them, going back to Reservoir Dogs all the way on to Hateful Eight. And I think ultimately Star Trek at its best is an ensemble working together for some greater good. And I think he would nail all of the character beats. And so that stuff I'm really positive about. I like the idea of Tarantino writing the dialogue, having the characters interact, giving everyone a big moment, not trying to make someone a movie star, but sharing the joy, sharing the pot. I like the idea of Samuel Jackson being in it. That's kind of been running around my head. Samuel Jackson in a Star Trek movie like that. I'm like, oh, because really, to me, that makes a lot of sense. Like a lot of sense. Sam Jackson as a captain in Star Trek just kind of blows my mind. Um, so yeah, is there negatives here? Well, I don't think this will happen. I think this is still a big what if. That doesn't mean Tarantino won't work on a screenplay and help make a Star Trek movie, but him directing, I'm not sure how that's going to go through. I think that depends on how his new movie does, and how he feels about it after that, because he's going to be focused on making that movie, and that's a pretty heavy material. So I wonder if what he's doing is so heavy, the Manson movie, that he wants to go into Star Trek and do something different, kind of like what Spielberg made Jurassic Park, and he got that out of the way before he did Schindler's List, because he just wanted to do something so positive before he did something so negative. I could see Tarantino kind of doing the opposite, where he does something really negative, and maybe his darkest film in a long time, and then decides like, okay, now I got to go make something positive, and I got to go look at humanity in a different way because I'm down. I'm down going into this dark place to write this material, to direct this material, to really go back to the Los Angeles grit that he established, himself as in the '90s, and he kind of left in the 2000s. He kind of left his indie roots when he went to make Kill Bill and all that. But it feels like with this movie, he's returning. But Star Trek would be his first big budget blockbuster type movie. I mean, he's made $100 million film. Don't get me wrong, he's made big budget movies. But Tarantino in space, like what camera angles would he do? How would he shoot it? How would he light it? How would he? I don't even know how he'd go about it. Now, a lot of people are probably going to hate this because they hate Tarantino the person. A lot of people hate his politics. They hate how he is. A lot of people are mad at him about the Harvey Weinstein thing. They feel like he knew more than he did and he should have done more. There's a lot of debate about Tarantino and the quality of his films, if he peaked a long time ago or if he's still great. People have been debating this a while. He talks about retirement because he can't shoot on film anymore and he just wants to write film books and become like a film critic and all that, and retire at 60. Stuff like that. I'm not sure how much of that's true or not. He's stuck to a lot of it, but that doesn't mean he won't pull out when it's time. Um, Though I'm not. I always said Abrams is better as a producer than a director. I've always said that Abrams is a really good producer, and I'll always stick to that. Everything that he's produced, I think his producing's helped the directors he finds, like Dan Trachtenberg to do Cloverfield 10 Lane, and that script was worked on by Damien Chazelle of Whiplash fame, and Matt Reeves and all the people he's worked with, and even going back to him working on the pilot of Lost, and then he had really nothing to do with the show. And all sorts of things. How we brought Brad Bird in for Mission Impossible. I think as a producer, Abrams has been very consistent, and I like him on this as a producer. I'm glad he's not directing. I really didn't like his style and approach to the material. I think you almost need a Tarantino type because you need someone who is such a skilled filmmaker that can bring something classic to this while also making it feel fresh again. Like, I don't think Tarantino's going to take the realism approach or the formalism. I think he's going to go complete classicism. He's going to go back to classic, old school, Star Trek, the way we've been wanting it for a long time. Strip it down to just its base form, what it is, and really get at the heart of it and why we love Star Trek. Give it some pathos again. So, am I for this? Yeah, I think this would be the most interesting project in a long time because the fact he's such a fan of Wrath of Khan. And you really start to think about it in your head, you're like, I could see Tarantino making a Wrath of Khan-esque kind of movie too. How well written that movie is, and how small it is, and it is more about character and dialogue. That's my hope that he does with this. I hope he doesn't, maybe have one action scene or two and have a couple of nice special effects moments, but mostly focus on character interaction, dialogue to be your whole driving force of the entertainment factor of the movie. What makes it hold together, the glue, should be what people are saying to each other and what it means to them, and what they should be talking about should be serious philosophical questions, and really be tapping at true science fiction. Um, and I think that's been missing in Star Trek a long time. I think the attempts at it have been sophomore at best. But Tarantino's someone that is well read enough and a good enough writer that he really could do something. And if he has a writer's room, I like that. Him having multiple people work on it with him, I think that's a great idea. Bring in some Star Trek veterans, and they kind of form something with you. And it just doesn't become some obvious like, hey, look, the Klingons are Donald Trump now. See how clever we are? It's like, oh my god, oh my, it's really cringe. But Tarantino, I want to be negative on this. I really do. I've been trying to find a negative spin because I love finding the negative in things. And like I said, I've been critical of a lot of Tarantino's recent films. I do like Hateful Eight a lot more than Django though. And I'm just, I'm more mixed on him than critical, really. It's half and half. I like the first half of Django. I don't like the second half. I like half of Inglourious Bastards. I like parts of Kill Bill. I like parts of Death Proof. Of course I like the car chase in Death Proof. I just don't like the whole movie. But, he always said he wanted to do a James Bond, and he actually wanted to do Casino Royale. He talked about this on Charlie Rose, and he said, the last line is, "The bitch is dead." And he wanted to do this black and white, set it in the 60s thing. Now, what's funny is that later on, Daniel Craig, when they did Casino Royale, they had this black and white sequence at the beginning, and of course they keep the line Ian Fleming wrote. Ian Fleming's actually a really good writer. People kind of underrate nowadays. They kind of overlook because they think of James Bond in the movies, and they don't go read these really well-paced, under 200-page books that really get inside the character's head. But then, Casino Royale came out and was this great movie. Martin Campbell did a great job. I don't think Tarantino would have done. I don't. I think the movie he wanted to make, outside of the period details, is probably pretty close to what they ended up making. Because when he described the kind of movie he wanted to make, Casino Royale as a book adaptation, it's pretty much what they did with the movie. I think he would have definitely written some better lines here and there, and the poker game might have been a little bit more exciting. But Casino Royale still has really great dialogue. Paul Haggis came in and did a great job working on that script. So, I really I don't have any issues with that. But it is interesting to think about him doing Star Trek because, the world we live in now, a lot of directors are, the auteur thing's a cliche anymore. It's like, it was a theory for a while, the theory of the auteur. But now it's like, yeah, Tarantino's an auteur, David Fincher's an auteur, Wes Anderson, you go on, and it gets a little boring, because I don't even necessarily think all of them are auteurs. Not every director just has a unique visual style or something is to me necessarily the auteur. I think it takes a little bit more than that. I think you have to have a voice just beyond visuals in your aesthetics. I think you actually have things to say in the way you structure the film and cut the movie. Like Kubrick. Kubrick wasn't just great because his visual. It was how he told his story. How he has Hal get killed, the way he does it as a voice just talking, dying. I'm dying. I can feel it. I can feel it. His approach to storytelling was so unique and focused, and he had a sense of control from his background in still photography and all that he could control where your eye was in the frame and all that. And he told the stories in his own visual way, and that's to me kind of the auteur thing is more that instead of just But, it's a debated thing. A lot of people don't even think the auteur is a real thing. But Tarantino, I do think, is a guy who has a unique voice. He is a remix artist. He does take... they try to talk about it like he's a hip-hop guy, like he takes samples and remixes them. He definitely is. But a lot of great filmmakers are. A lot of great filmmakers are influenced by other things and then remix it. So I'm not going to knock the guy for that. That doesn't bother me. I'm not so much interested in a Tarantino movie of Star Trek. I'm interested in Tarantino not being Tarantino. And what was that whole thing? I thought Chris Hemsworth was supposed to come back as George Kirk for a movie. But I guess after the performance of Beyond, they don't want to do that. So this still may never happen, Tarantino Star Trek. And I don't know how serious Abrams and everyone is. But, of course, why wouldn't you want to get a big name like that to work on it? I think it would bring people back. But I don't really have much to say about this because you don't know what the movie is yet. We don't know a lot about it. We just have theories based off some interviews and stuff like that. You really don't know how committed Tarantino is to it 100%. And he might not end up directing it or anything and just working on it, which does change it. If someone else is directing it, that changes everything. But I hope he does decide to do something like this because for a long time I've been wanting him to do something different. And it's funny because he said he would never do sci-fi. He said that the crime genre is a genre he loved, and he could really see him doing that. And he said that he felt like he could do horror and stuff. But in an interview I saw, he said he didn't really think sci-fi was for him. Not that he doesn't love sci-fi, and he wouldn't like to do something, but he just said he didn't really think it was a genre that was suited for him. So it is interesting now that he's talking about doing sci-fi, and I know some people wouldn't call like Star Trek necessarily hard sci-fi, and I really wouldn't either. But I think Star Trek is a humanist tale, a humanist franchise that is more about humanity and the good and bad of that and what we can do together. And yeah, it's about exploration and the future and progress. And I think if Tarantino can embrace that optimism and just leave cynicism at the door, I think he could make a movie that we need right now in this climate of anger and fighting and all that and divide. I think he could make a movie that's ultimately about coming together and doing the right thing for the better of all mankind and not for your own selfish reasons. Tarantino Star Trek, Sam Jackson in it. Like, I just can't get that out of my head. Maybe Kurt Russell. Some cool things there. Just saying. I don't think he'll go as Guardians of the Galaxy as I would assume if Tarantino ever did a sci-fi. Because to me, that's kind of what I always thought he would do if he did sci-fi. Something like an R-rated Guardians. More of what James Gunn was going for. Something that is a little bit more Buckaroo Banzai or Ice Pirates. But this is cool news. Love him or hate him. That to me, that's cool news. It's interesting. But I'm more excited about that Manson movie. I've heard comparisons to Pulp Fiction already, but a lot of people say that. But I like what I'm hearing about the casting. Tom Cruise might be in it. I'm like, ooh, Tom Cruise with Tarantino. Hello. And it's that time where some of these franchises really uh, need a kick to the gut. They need a punch to the face. They need somebody to really give them a new life again. And Tarantino's as good as anyone else they could really pick. There's directors I'd prefer to do a new Star Trek movie, obviously, but he's not at the bottom of the list. He's somewhere in the middle, so that's pretty sweet. So I'd prefer this happening than Justin Lin coming back or another Abrams type movie, another new Trek. I'd much prefer a more classic, old school Star Trek. And I think the people who run this franchise will learn that's what a lot of us just actually want, and they can't seem to understand that. They keep trying more and more to drift away from what Star Trek is. Meanwhile, Disney is just embracing what Star Wars is, and just milking it for all it's worth until it's going to be oversaturated. But still, they get what Star Wars is, at least to why people like it on some level, like the mythos and all that. Where Star Trek, it's like they keep forgetting that it is the humanism and the philosophy and all that, and the exploration that we like about it. Little stories within a big universe, not one epic story. Star Trek is not an action franchise. It's not an epic action blockbuster franchise. It's character driven, and honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing Aaron Sorkin work on this. I actually think he'd be a good fit for the writing on a Star Trek movie. Sorkin. But I don't see that happening. Although that'd be cool. So anyway, I don't know. Tell me what you guys think in the comment section. Do you want Tarantino Star Trek? Who would you want to do Star Trek? What do you want the premise of the movie to be? Do you want it to be what he's talked about, or what kind of Trek movie would you like? Do you want it to be a continuation of the current Abrams franchise with Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto and Zoe Saldana and them, or do you want it to be with new characters and a whole new thing? Because I would like to see that. I'd like to see new characters in Star Trek. And I know Star Trek Discovery's doing that, but in a movie, I would like to see new characters, not characters based off a TV show. Because I think there's unlimited stories in this universe, so I think you could make multiple movies about different crews. I don't think you need, like, this movie, make it about one crew, and then make a second movie about a totally different crew, and then make the next movie about a different crew, like almost an anthology. Who's going to be in this, man? Like, is Bruce Willis going to show up in Star Trek? Which would be kind of cool. Michael Madsen, I don't know, Tim Roth. Who's going to be in this? That's a good... Name some of your dream casting choices, by the way. I would like to hear that, too. Let's see how it plays out, people. Anyway, like and subscribe. Come on. Hit that subscribe button and that little bell so you get the notifications. And please rewind your VHS tapes before you bring them back to the store. Tarantino used to work at a VHS store, and I'm sure he'd be very unhappy if you didn't rewind. So, just do it for him if you're a fan. And for all you Star Trek fans out there, I'm sorry if I didn't drop a bunch of knowledge and all that. I'm not like I'm a Star Trek fan, for sure. But I'm not one of those people where I can speak Klingon and I know everything and I can tell you everything about the Federation and I can actually go into the science of it and stuff like that. I'm just not one of those Trek fans. But I'd say I'm a high casual. And I'm definitely a fan of the original series. So, to all of you out there that aren't happy with this, I'm sorry. Someone else, I'm sure, is going to make a better video discussing the Star Trek elements. I was here more talking about what I think tonally Tarantino will do. And like I said, I want to see him make a happier, more upbeat, exciting, fun movie that's something that children could watch. And I really think he could make something like that. And I would like to see him make something like that. And when I bring up Frank Capra, I really mean that. I think Tarantino could do something like It's a Wonderful Life or a Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And tonally, I'm not saying the same, but the tone. I think that's perfect for Star Trek. And I would like to see something like that in the cynical world of today. I would like to see something like that tells you that, hey, man, don't focus on that. Let's look. That's why I was a big fan of Jurassic Park, Spielberg and Michael Crane's book, because the scientists were optimistic about humanity, and ultimately they didn't care about the dinosaurs coming back and all that. They cared about how this affected people and what was right or wrong. And I love that, and I would like to see a movie like that in the Star Trek universe again. It's all just a discussion about what's right or wrong for the betterment of everyone else and what we should do, and trusting others, being open to new people and new things. Discovery, the sense of discovery, that's really what's missing in movies today.
The actual answer to the question is I would be more inclined to do a Star Trek kind of thing rather than Star Wars. And I like Star Wars and everything. But,
So what would you do with a Star Trek movie then?
Let's workshop this right now. I'm ready.
Well, frankly, to tell you the truth, I mean, one of the things that I haven't considered it like I'm going to do it, all right? But I did web spin a little bit about the idea. Like, I'm definitely a fan of the original series, and I'm definitely, in particularly, a fan of William Shatner.
Great.
I mean, that's my key into the series is William Shatner. But you could take some of the great classic Star Trek episodes and just easily expand them to 90 minutes or more.
Right.
And really do some really amazing stuff.